Hi, I'm Dom Famularo, and I'm at a very exciting point in my life because I have had an opportunity because of the sessions.org, an incredible website that allows us to project education about the music business, the industry part of the music fun that we have and the passion that we live. The Sessions helps us to deliver from very, very skilled, legendary people information of how they totally took their life on the path down the music lane. What happens now is I get the chance to speak to many great people, and I'm especially excited today because I have with me Eddie Tuduri, who I have been a fan of yours, Eddie, for many, many years and followed what you've done, and I still continue to be inspired by all that you're doing. Let's start from the beginning. 12 years old, you were already being paid to play.
Yeah, Ed Stan's music. I remember, I come from a small town in Connecticut, Derby, Connecticut.
Yeah, I know.
60 miles from the Bronx.
Right on, yeah.
But and my family were all from Brooklyn, and I think we've talked about that before.
Absolutely.
But there was a couple of old guys that had a music store, and there were no drummers. There were like 5 people in town. So they, at 12 years old, they'd already studied a little bit. I started at 9, so by 12 I was a pro. And they asked me to play at a wedding, and I remember my dad had to help me pack the stuff up, and that was fun.
And you started and you got paid?
I got paid, yeah. I actually got paid at 12 years old.
And did that whet your appetite now for the music business part of the industry?
Gosh, I never really thought about making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Or being, as a drummer, you have that sort of, I know as a child I thought I wanted to be in a band, a really successful band. I wanted to be part of something.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be a star necessarily. I wanted to be in a band that was respected.
Yeah.
And I went to New York a lot when I was a kid, and God, I saw Krupa at the Metropole.
Well, that's powerful now. Being in the East Coast at that point,
Yeah.
that's where all those guys were there now. Just talk about Krupa for a second. Gene Krupa, the magic of being able to see someone like Gene Krupa, where many of the younger generation just think of him as a name of history, like we think of George Washington.
God, yeah.
How was Gene?
Oh, jeez. I wish I got to, I was very young, and they wouldn't let me in, but they let me stand in the door.
Oh, wow.
Right? And he was playing on the bar at the Metropole. Up behind the bar was the bandstand.
Yeah.
And I was near where my relatives were there in New York, so I got to see Gene Krupa. For me, wow.
And what an aura he had, right? Everyone talks about just the presence he had when he played drums, and just himself as a person.
And Dugo Chancellor.
Yeah.
You ever
Great,
see
great.
Dugo?
Absolutely.
When you go to see him, you can't help but smile.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
he's an incredible player. God knows.
Yeah.
But he exudes this happiness, and Gene was like that. You wouldn't, when people compared him to like Buddy Rich or anybody else, there was no comparison.
Interesting.
He's Gene Krupa.
Yeah.
Everybody had their thing, but for me as a kid, he was the cat.
So who would you say, if you had to name like 3 or so influences in the drumming industry that inspired you? Put Gene at the top, Gene would be there?
Well, yeah, as a child.
Yeah.
Later on when I began to learn to play, of course, there were other guys. And I have to say Bernard Purdy, a little later on.
Yeah.
But I love Bernard.
What a feel, right?
Yeah, gosh, yeah.
Still to this day, yeah.
Yeah, and he's just a nutcase. You can tell him I said something.
I will. I'll see him later.
Yeah, he was, a big influence in, all the jazz greats of the day.
Yeah.
But for me, it was kind of that. I was playing swing until I saw James Brown. Yeah. I saw James Brown at an early age, and
that changed everything.
It changed everything.
Talking about a couple of drummers with grooves, right?
Oh God, yeah. So and I got to know Clyde later on.
Clyde, what a gem.
And that changed my life. I wasn't so interested in being. I studied, but I didn't study as much. After a while, I was playing.
Yeah.
By the time I was 15 or 16, I had record deals, and I was on the road already, and I was playing all the time, and so I still had that in my mind that I wanted to be a drummer in a successful band.
Right.
So I wasn't always at home studying.
So we'll talk about, at 16 you already had some record deals, so you hooked up with people in the East Coast there?
Roulette Records.
Roulette Records, wow,
York,
sure.
Remember that?
Absolutely out of New York, yeah.
Yes.
And who was in the band? Local guys?
Local guys, yeah. We were called the East Coast Journeymen, and it was, kind of a pop band, neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
But we had a record deal, which, you know, we never made a dime. But we recorded, and we had a record deal.
And you recorded in New York?
Tommy James and the Shondells were on the label.
Wow.
And Little Anthony and the Imperial.
Imperial, sure, yeah.
I saw Little Anthony in the office one day. I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Well, they were big stars back then.
They really were.
And they were powerful musicians on stage, and as
Yeah.
was the likes of a character like James Brown.
Oh,
You know,
my God,
when they came out, before he even sang a note, you were in the aura of James Brown, as you were with many of the musicians at that time.
Someone offered me a good friend of mine played trumpet. Well, obviously we've all probably had friends with guys who played in his band. And at one point I was living in Toronto and that gig came up, but I knew too much about him.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go there.
Oh, interesting.
I just didn't.
Interesting.
So I left it alone because he was such an influence, an idol to me, you know. The one time I met him was at a Sha Na Na show. Remember those guys?
Absolutely, man. No, wow.
I subbed
How exciting.
for what's his name once, and they slicked my hair. They called me Fast Eddie. You know, it was really fun. But they did a show, and they said, Eddie, you got to come down. James Brown is on the show tonight. And I said, wow. And I went down, and then no one introduced me. I was sitting around. So I saw him coming down the hall with these two bodyguards, and I stopped him. And the bodyguards looked, and he said, no, it's okay. And he had a big basket of fruit or something, and he gave it to his friends. And I said, you know, I've been watching you, and you've been my biggest inspiration. I'm a drummer, you know, and I just wanted to thank you. I mean, who gets this opportunity to stop a person like that? And he hugged me, and he said, "Thank you so." He was like the kindest man.
How amazing.
He was, you know, contrary to everything.
Yeah,
you know.
you say, yeah.
And so that's my experience with him.
Wow.
And that's what I take with me in my heart. You
Well,
know?
that's beautiful.
And
That's beautiful. So you heard a lot of great drummers being in the New York area.
Yeah.
Lessons. Did you take lessons from any local teachers or?
I had a teacher named Al Gardella when I was a kid. I studied with for first 4 or 5 years. He taught me how to read. He taught me my rudiments.
So you had fundamentals with him. That's great.
You know, the fundamental stuff. Then I didn't. Then I was on the road working all the time, and I didn't start taking lessons again until I moved to California, and I studied with Ralph Humphrey.
Oh man, Ralph.
I was playing in a group where there were a lot of odd times, and it was a lot. It was over my head. It was just over my head. And Ralph and I were good friends, and I said, "You got to help me," you know. And he said, "Okay." And he was so clinical in those days. He would have like his little sheet, and he'd say, "Okay, develop patterns in 5, 7, and 9 coming next week," you know. So I'd go home and I'd figure this stuff. And I always thought James Brown.
Yeah.
How would James Brown play in 7? And I wrote all this stuff down. I was really excited. And I went to Ralph, I remember, and I said, "Oh, check this out." Because he knew I was a player, and he appreciated what I did. I said, "Check this out." And he's standing there with his little pad. And I played this real funky thing, you know. He said, "Okay, now I love the one and I said, no, wait. Wait a minute. You can't just say next." That was some badass funk shit in 7, pal. You know, and he started laughing, and you know,
But
and we've been best friends.
And what a beautiful guy, and what an
Oh,
intense,
man.
diverse little player, because he plays any kind of music at any different level, at any level of complexity. He really.
I went to do an audition with Frank Zappa one day. I knew his manager. I said, "This isn't for me." He said, "No, Eddie, please go play with him." I said, "Okay." So I go down, and Frank, the band is there. You know, it's my turn to play, and he says, "Do odd times bother you?" And I said, "So long as it grooves, it's okay with me." He said, "Okay." He said, "Well, the first song is in 13." He says, "But I got to tell you," he says, "the subdivisions are." You know, there's a bar of 2 bars of 5 that are 1 2 1 2 1 3 1 2 1, and the other one's just 1 2 1 3. And I said, "Hey, I studied with Ralph Humphrey too." and Frank said, "Oh man, you know, we played a little bit, and I went home."
Yeah.
And I think Chad got the gig.
Oh,
you
is
know,
that great?
But it was so cool.
But what great to have that level of experience. Being able to draw a feeling from James Brown. Or from Frank Zappa, two diverse musicians.
Yeah.
And you said you were traveling a lot when you were younger. You were on the road traveling, and
with local bands, you
Right.
know, in Chevy trucks, and
right.
you know, a lot of that's X-rated. But you know, we left from Connecticut the first time I went out to the Midwest and back, and then when I was 17, I got a job with Cannibal and the Headhunters.
Mm-hmm.
And
Great band.
It was a great band.
Absolutely.
And they came from the West Coast, and we had an East Coast band, and that was my first introduction to. They had a #1 record, and they had opened for the Beatles the year before at
Jeez.
Shea Stadium.
Oh, that's heavy.
Right, and we did the Brooklyn Fox, the Murray Decay show.
Right.
We did
Those are the biggest shows.
We did all these.
Those were the biggest of the biggest at that time.
I'll tell you, it
Yeah.
was. There was 9 days in a row, like I don't know how many shows every single day, and then the bands hung around upstairs. In the meantime, and I remember it's my first time working with a big audience. I was 16 or 17, and they had this whole dance routine, and the drummer had to kick the dance routines.
Yeah.
Right, and then I didn't know that the orchestra was behind me, like and I didn't have my drums. They said there's drums there, so it was mostly an R&B show. But he always brought in. He had the Fortunes and the Moody Blues and Peter and Gordon.
Oh man, absolutely.
And then he had Wilson Pickett was the headliner, Lenny Welch, the Toys, the OJs, the Spinners.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
it was great.
What bands?
For
What
a
bands?
kid like me, you know.
What bands? Yeah.
And I was hanging around with Wilson's drummer Buzzy and Buzzy Benson, and Ernest X. Smith was his bass player, and they I was really young, so they took me under their wing
Oh,
and
great.
and taught me some. So that's where I really learned. That's where you really learn.
Absolutely.
You're backstage, or you're watching,
Backstage.
or you're listening. How'd you do that?
Yeah.
And they kind of, what a thrill! What a thrill! When I got there, I guess everybody was renting the drums from the pit guy at $50 a shot. I said, I can't pay $50 a day for. Are you kidding? So the McCoys were there. Rick Derringer.
Absolutely. Derringer was
First-
on guitar. Absolutely.
First band.
Yeah.
And the kid in the McCoy said, "Oh, you can use my kit." I said, "All right." They had long hair and stuff. I had a sharkskin suit, and patent leather shoes, and we were playing with the R&B thing. And this kid says, "You can use mine." I said, "Oh, great." And I remember they had this fanfare, da 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 da. And then the whole show would come out and take a bow, and then they'd go back off,
How cool.
And I'm playing, da, 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 but I run out on stage, right? And they haven't opened the curtain, and there's no drum stool, and he's got the hi-hat tightened down because he stood up and played.
Oh, is that funny?
He stood up and
That's right.
shook his head and played bang.
He
like
stood
that.
up. That's exactly
And so,
right. How funny was that?
So I'm going. So they ran out just as the curtain. I'm nervous as how they run out. The curtain opens and everybody goes da 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 da. Da. So we're playing now. Cannibal comes out with the background singers, and they're coming out, and we're vamping, and then it goes, "You got to know how to pony," and the horn section stands up, ba ba, and I had never heard anything like it before.
How cool was that
almost
horn section?
Fell out.
Yeah,
I went,
yeah.
So
Yeah, that was the beginning of that whole horn section
Oh, man.
vibe that with many
Oh,
bands had
it
that.
was so-
Blood, Sweat, and
it
Tears
was-
in Chicago and stuff.
It was
Yeah.
so good. All my bands have horn sections.
Yeah. Boy, how great. So here you are playing, you're getting all this experience. Then as you got older, then you hit a challenge.
My neck?
Yeah.
Oh, skipped that to that. Okay, yeah. I broke my neck in a body surfing accident in Carpinteria, California.
And Emil, you're playing drums, you're doing the whole thing. And,
I was on
and
the
your
road
whole
at that
career
time with
tons of
Messina.
bands you were playing with, yeah.
Jimmy Messina and I done a record in Nashville, and he talked me into moving back here.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to move to LA, so I moved to Carpinteria, a little beach town
Right.
just south of Santa Barbara. And I body surfed every day, always have,
Yeah.
and I love the ocean. I was out one day, and there aren't really incredibly large waves at this beach. They call it the safest beach in the world.
Right.
It was during the El Nino time. The system was a tad different, and the currents.
Waves were higher, currents were stronger.
Right.
Yeah.
And the waves were different. And I just jumped in this wave. So the last one of the day, I had a gig that night. I had played the night before. And I jumped in the wave, and it just went bam. And I heard a big crack and then nothing. I was 3 feet underwater, totally paralyzed, nobody there. And I felt it's a lot of things, a whole series of things happened, otherworldly things happened. I knew I had to drown. I was floating, drifting into this, what seemed like an abyss of unconditional love and warmth. It was like being in God's hot tub.
Wow.
And I didn't want to come back. But so I knew in order to continue on this journey, I'd have to open my mouth and drown.
And you were conscious of this?
Yes. I wanted to discard the cage and go on, because it was beautiful what was happening.
Wow.
And so then I thought, I have to drown. That sucks. And then I thought, no, actually it doesn't. And I immediately opened my mouth to let the water in. As I opened my mouth, I felt a hand lift me from the bottom, and I got a mouthful of air, and I could see the beautiful Carpinteria sky. And then I was placed gently at the shore, just in this position, where the lifeguard with the most seniority on the Central Coast happened to be on duty. He came over and he built some surfboards up. He said, don't anybody touch this guy, leave him. They called the paramedics the best paramedic with the best. Well, the one with the most seniority on the Central Coast happened to be on duty.
Right.
So they handled me perfectly from the shore to the skid, where they transported me to the hospital, where the very best neurosurgeon happened to be there.
Incredible.
Pushed me in, and he said, I'll take this guy. And
These are clear signs.
Oh, yeah. And you know, they did the MRI, and he came in to talk to me, and I was joking, by the way, the whole time. I never felt any fear, no trepidation whatsoever. I made jokes in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and they were looking at each other and going, you know, this guy's a quadriplegic. This, you know, they were laughing nervously, but you know, they thought I was delusional, which, you know, they weren't that far off. But no, seriously, the doctor came in and he told me about the operation, you know, and I said, so do you lose many? He said, no, I don't lose too many. You know, he laughed, you know, and then we went into the operating room, and I was smiling and telling jokes, and the whole crew was there, you know, and the anesthesiologist looked like this bass player that I worked with. I said, man, you look just like this guy. I said, I hope you're as good as he was. And he's going, all right, 1, 2, 3. And then I was out, and I woke up in 6 hours later, and they had taken a bone out of my hip and fused 5, 6, and 7 in the cervical vertebra. Put 4 screws in it. And it works pretty good. You know, I can't, you know, there's stuff wrong, but I'm laughing.
Yeah.
And, you know, after a week in the ICU, they shipped me to the rehab. And in the rehab is where the Rhythmic Arts Project really was born. I was totally paralyzed, but little by little, I could wiggle a toe, you know, and then this hand came back. And you have to lay flat when you have a spinal cord injury because of blood pressure. So I was lying, and, you know, there's a little railing on the bed. I asked a friend of mine to bring me some drumsticks and stuff. And on the side of the bed with the stick, I was going. Wow, I still got it.
You're starting to feel it.
You know, I'm just a hand, but I can feel it. It feels good.
Yeah.
And, you know, some other people heard me, and I said to the fellow who was watching us, the aide in the room, I said, can you just do on my food tray? And he said, Oscar's. And I said, yeah. He said, I could do that. He would. So I was going. Nice. And this little old lady ran in from the other side of the ward, Edith, who had spinal cord surgery. She was in a lot of pain, crying all the time. Everybody wanted to just hug her, but we couldn't move. But she was this sweet old lady. She said, Eddie, I want to play. So I had a cowbell there. I said, give her a cowbell. I said, just play the ands. 1. So we and you do da. So she couldn't quite get that. But Ted, who was the gentleman to my left, had pancreatic cancer. He had a stroke on the table. He had diabetes. They said, get your ducks in a row. You're out of here. He says, no. He bought a brand new motorcycle, and he apparently washed his his chemo down with lemonade, he said.
Oh, man.
I don't know. And he drove all the way across the country, saying goodbye to people, and and then when he got to Washington, D.C., he went out with his son, got drunk, and totaled the motorcycle, broke every bone in his body. So the pancreatic cancer, the stroke, the diabetes, now he broke every bone in his body.
That's a lot going against him.
Yeah, pinned them all together.
Wow.
That's how he ended up as my neighbor. But he's in bad shape.
Right.
But he's going, Eddie, I want to play. So the Oscar said, I don't know, man. I said, just put the cowbell on his chest. He's got one hand, too.
Yeah.
And tell him to go tell him the hands.
Yeah.
So we had this thing, and he played it perfectly. Then Edith is going, but Eddie, I want to play. So I said, Edith, just clap.
Yeah.
So we had Now, that ain't a drum circle. It's an ensemble.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the doctors and everybody started coming in. They're dancing. I said, I'm going to get in trouble here. I mean, they loved it. Fast forward, after a couple of weeks, they were able to get me into a wheelchair. As soon as I got in a wheelchair, I had to participate in my own recovery, meaning physical and occupational and recreational therapy. And
Right.
in the meantime, they were sending psychiatrists and speech therapists, and they thought I was delusional because I was making fun of everything and having such a great time in the hospital.
What a personal constitution you have. That's incredible.
They had, my friend owned this company called All One, which is a supplement powder. It's very good. And another friend brought a blender, and I was making drinks. I said, don't anybody eat any hospital food. And I had the little old ladies lined up in the hospital. In the morning, I said, bring your fruit and your yogurt, and I'll make drinks for you.
Right.
I couldn't, but I had the aides do it.
Yeah.
And I would get this electric wheelchair and go down to the occupational kitchen and get all this stuff, and I had the whole hospital rocking. I mean, it was really fun. Then when I started to get around and doing my therapy, when I got to occupational therapy, by this time I had told everybody that I got hurt, and everybody I said, I need some bongos and congas and maracas, whatever. Well, thousands everybody sent. John Good sent a beautiful set of drums out in the day room one day. Somebody came in and said, Eddie, come out in the day room. Look at this. And there it was.
John is a very special soul.
Sweetheart, yeah.
Very special soul.
Yeah. So here there were thousands of dollars, but they brought it all to the mat room, and they were rolling people in, mostly people with strokes or traumatic brain injury, or people like myself, or whatever would land them in a rehabilitation institute.
Right.
And I didn't know exactly what to do, but everybody had instruments, and I thought that ensemble thing, and then we did some call and response, and then it went so well, I started figuring, let's use basic musical notation. Everybody can learn what a quarter note is,
Right.
or 2 quarter notes, or 3 quarter notes, and that way we'll have some basis of the tactile, and we worked on rehab goals, memory, attention, focus, range of motion.
Interesting.
My therapist would try get, like if I was holding a drumstick, they'd hold their hand up so you can see if you can hit my hand. They were very creative.
Yeah.
They had me play a piano because this hand didn't work very well, and I would try to play 4 notes with this hand. It still doesn't work perfectly. It's okay.
So you start getting people involved in this rhythmical.
Yeah, we called it rhythm
communication.
therapy. But what happened is it was approved by the hospital. They started charging people for it, and
Interesting.
so we went to a regional conference, and myself and the Libby Whaley, who was the director of recreational therapy there, and we started showing it. And I met other therapists who said, one therapist said to me, "Have you ever worked with children with Down syndrome or, an intellectual or developmental disability?" And I said, "No." They said, "Would you mind?" And I, not at all. I
Sure.
went there. They had 2 groups of children, one from 5 to 12, the other from 12 to 18. And we did very simple things at first. The recreational therapist took an egg shaker. She had the 5, 6 kids sitting around, and some of them were
An egg shaker is what we make in the music industry, which is the shape of an egg with beads in it that you can shake. It's a plastic egg, yeah.
Exactly right. So she said, everybody got an egg. She said, everybody put the egg on the ground and put your hands in your lap. So they did. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Now pick the egg up, shake it over your head, put it back on the ground, put your hands on your lap. Pick it up, touch your elbow, put it down. These are prepositional concepts that are not familiar to children with intellectual disability.
Right.
So we turned that into one of the first Rhythmic Arts Project exercises. Go around your body, go through your legs, shake it over your head, touch your chin, put it under your chin, put it in on your, you know. That turned into, when we developed a quarter note, they learned how to count. So, like when you and I learned how to count to 4,
Right.
our teacher wrote 1, 2, 3, 4 on the blackboard, and we copied on our yellow line paper, 1, 2, 3,
Right.
4, and that's kind of how we did it. It was visual,
Right.
maybe tactile by writing it.
Right.
That's it. Here, with people with Down, let's just say Down syndrome, they may not grasp a conventional scholastic, so we show them who wants to play, who likes rock and roll. Everybody likes rock and roll. Everybody.
Right.
So I said, well, let's learn how to count the way I learned how to count in rock and roll. Here's a quarter note. Quarter note's worth 1 beat. This is what it looks like. And I'd draw it on the blackboard.
Right.
You know, and every time I come to that class, I'd come in and say, well, what's a quarter note? And they'd all go, 1 beat.
Yeah, cool.
And then I said, well, here's 4 beats. And we made a chart, 4 beats. So you see it. So that's the visual. Then I give you a djembe. Oh, my God, a drum.
That's cool.
Right, you put the drum. Now, how many beats? 4 beats. So play it on the drum. 1, 2, 3, 4, and speak.
Right.
So you have visual. Don't look at the drum as the drum, but the tactile component.
Correct.
So it's visual, tactile. You hear it, so it's auditory.
Right.
Combined with speech. A multi-sensory approach for what? To learn how to count to 4.
How great. Great.
Now take the quarter note and make it left, right, left, right. Laterality is very important.
Right.
Temporal organization, differentiation, all the goals that speech therapists, occupational therapists, I work with a group of occupational therapists now, always have. Those goals are to think more clearly, to dot the I's and cross the T's,
Right.
so to speak.
Right.
So now we have left, right, then right, left, left, right, left, all linear in the beginning.
Right.
All right. And then we get into rudiment, what you and I would call a rudiment, a 5-stroke roll.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it goes the other way.
Right, left, right.
Yeah.
Then left, right,
left.
left. Yeah.
So for you and I, it's a 5-stroke roll. To them, we're getting them to think from both sides.
Absolutely.
Then, in autism, which they are sometimes harder to maintain focus, we give them a 13-stroke roll.
How cool.
And they have to stay in it. And then, as I traveled around the country, I learned that people were not the old guard, so to speak, the old teachers, the old people in these organizations were saying, they can't read music, they can't spell, they can't do that. Because I'd have them spell their names on the drum, spell their neighbors' names, count, learn how to add. So how much is 2 + 2? Don't tell me, play it on the drum.
So Eddie, you're working with all these different programs, and the ages can vary. Are they young to old?
Yeah, for instance, I don't know if you can see this. This is a 3-year-old
Absolutely.
child.
With autism.
No, she has Down syndrome.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. And right now, the quarter note has become red, blue, black, and green.
Mm-hmm.
So she is doing eye-to-hand coordination. She's following directions. She's listening. Her peers are paying attention, so they're self-regulating.
Right.
All these things come into play. She's only 3 years old, and she's doing it. She's getting it. We might ask her to touch the black drum with her right hand and the red one with her left hand, which is called crossing the midline.
Right.
So all these exercises have extended value, and the teachers find their own way to integrate these lessons into their existing curriculum.
Right.
And it's great. It's great to see what they. We have a new book coming out that I wrote with 4 other teachers in Quito, Ecuador, from the American International School. It's in 3 levels, beginning at 18 months old to 5 years old. Typical children.
Right.
But the typical exercises are the exercises that we derived from my
How
114 pages of
That is
developmentally
amazing.
disabled
That's amazing.
exercises. So it's all good.
So you've worked with all these incredibly, challenging situations. Probably the description of that lift that you felt from the water to give you that breath of air, to deliver you to the beach.
Yeah.
It seems like that really was the beginning of giving you some massive purpose.
I believe that. I'm really not that spiritual a guy. I'm not religious at all, and but there's no denying
You've
the
experienced
divine
something,
guidance
absolutely.
and the fear. And when I work with children, sometimes it's very difficult, and it's not me. I know it isn't me. I don't take credit for any of this.
Well, you're the messenger, and what you're carrying is very, very powerful. And that in itself is a huge responsibility.
Hey, I could have died. It was, there's like a 50-50 chance, or I could have been in a chair and been much more challenged.
But look what you've done from what you've taken, which, listen, there are many people that would have taken what you did and they would have felt they were victims.
Right.
You turn this around, whatever ingredient you have and whatever is inside of you really fueled you to start the Rhythmic Arts Project. And the amount of people that you've reached and the power that you have with these children and these people that are even older but act like children, you've given them purpose. That's very powerful. And here you are now working with, it's basically a global process now.
We're in more than 10 countries now, and our books will be distributed worldwide, and this methodology is a legacy.
Yeah.
And people think sometimes it's a drum program, and it really isn't. I mean, yet we have fun.
Yeah.
We do. I ask everybody to play, and we do call and response, and we sing, and
there's levels of expression in there that are probably very, very powerful.
Really great stuff. Yeah. So, it is a drum program. It is immersed in musical notation, and it's creative thinking. For me, my whole life has been a blessing since this happened. I never felt any, when people first saw me in the hospital, they would come in and look at me and start crying, and I would, well, I'm fine. Vinny, our friend Vinny came
Vinny's
in.
the best.
The first guy to visit me, right? One morning I looked up, right, and I was still the tubes and everything, and he was at the end of the bed, and he was like, "Whoa." I said, "What's the matter, man?" He said, "Well," and I said, Vinny, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I said, my back peak is a little weak at the moment, but I'm going to be fine.
But Vinny Colaiuta is one of the most compassionate, sensitive, and deepest people.
Kindest
person at such a high level. With the journey that you have been blessed with, which is really how I see it, what would you conclude to give as a message? I mean, there'll be thousands upon thousands of viewers as they watch this video and they see and hear your each word. What would you leave for the next generation on what maybe their responsibility is?
As musicians, we're in a very unique place to do something outside of ourselves to help others. And this is my path. But I've seen music change the world in so many different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be music. Look what I'm doing. It's motivated by music. It comes from my experience with music, but it's a whole. So don't limit yourself as to what you're capable of. And living a life of service is the best life we can live. Not being the best drummer or guitar player in the world, not being the best looking guy or girl, or not being the best at being of service. That's what I strive for, and what I would. All these aspirations we have, especially as entertainers, we kind of get sometimes a little crazy.
Sure.
And we need to curb that and check our egos and look at the world and look at all the wonderful things people are doing. And find that path.
Well, that for sure. It doesn't get any better to close down a session, which is to have that, living a life of service. Eddie Tuduri, I thank you so much for your time and your blessings of what you have. Jules Follett, is so wonderful to allow us to do these different interviews of different legends that you have. Sessions.org. Again, I'm Dom Famularo with a series of these legendary interviews that will absolutely reach you at the deepest part of who you are to empower your life through these great people. Eddie, thank you so much. As always, you are the best. Just the absolute best. Beautiful. Thanks. We'll see you later.